Welcome to Parent-Tween Connection Talks, where we bring you insight from the experts who can help you navigate life with teens and tweens. I'm Clarissa Constantine, your host and founder of the Parent-Tween Connection. I've worked with teenagers and their families for more than 20 years, and I believe that the more supported and knowledgeable their parents and members of the proverbial village feel, the better they can connect with and advocate for their teens and tweens. And ultimately, that means we'll lose fewer kids to suicide. So join us as Parent-Tween Connection talks about anything and everything teen and tween related. And when we're done, we invite you to come on over to our Facebook group to continue the conversations. Welcome back to the Parent-Tween Connection Talks, the podcast where we talk anything and everything about teens and tweens. Today, we're having a conversation with Coach Jen Bilger. Jen is a speaker and a certified behavioral consultant and coach. She has a unique focus on the behavioral side of life that not only enables leaders like parents to discover their own whys, but also to help them understand their strengths and use them to enhance their communications and interactions. This allows them to adapt and adjust more effectively, to overcome obstacles, and to choose the best pathways to go forward into success. Now, she works largely with businesses and professionals, but all of the concepts that she teaches also apply to our interactions with teens. Today, we talk about different personality types and how, as adults and parents, our personality types impact our kids. And also, we talk about how to recognize these personality types and traits in the kids we have in our worlds. We talk parenting styles, we talk child interaction styles, and overall, we walk away with insight about how to have better interactions with the teens and tweens in our worlds. I am super excited to have Coach Jen Bilger with us here for the next episode of the Parent-Tween Connection Talks. Coach Jen is a specialist in all things interaction, communication, and largely works with professionals and in the business setting, looking at situational leadership and engagement between employers and employees. But so much of what she does also translates into the parent-child dynamic as well. Coach Jen, thank you for being with me.
Thanks for having me, Clarissa. I appreciate the time today.
Absolutely. I think a lot of what you have to offer, there are a lot of crossovers from the business world into family dynamics because we're talking human dynamics.
Yes.
So you are a specialist in, again, communication coaching and even behavioral evaluations or assessments. You're a specialist in the DISC assessment. So can we start, first of all, just give us a overview of what is the DISC assessment and how useful is it? Like how is it used?
So first off, I came out of the corporate world 20 years in HR. And a lot of times my advice was going back to, if you were talking to your children, how would you talk to them when I was telling them how to interact with employees? So that's where this kind of goes over and everything. But the DISC is something that is, it's an assessment that is used in business, and there are so many different wonderful assessments. I'm a behavioral consultant and I love different ones for different reasons, but this one is all about behaviors. And the reason why I focus in this area a lot when I'm talking with employers and employees or with parents and children is because behaviors can be adapted, but they don't have to be exactly changed. So we as humans, we're born with certain innate qualities that are always going to be a part of us. Understanding what that means allows us to understand how to better interact with the world around us in communication, in our everyday lives, in our business lives, and when we're dealing with our parental and children type relationships that we have. Even so, I'm a child as well.
Right?
I really wish my parents had this, but my mom was amazing because there's a hallmark of the style that I fit into as an adult that I fit into as a child as well. Mm-hmm. And my mom would explain things to me of make sure I have a better understanding of the world around me. And it was a very good thing that she did that, because And when I ask her about it nowadays, she was just like, because if I didn't, you would pepper me with all these questions and you would constantly want to do whatever. You were very headstrong when you were a kid and you knew what the answer was and you wanted to go towards the answer. But if I explained to you that that's not exactly the right answer and gave you a good enough explanation, you would do what I asked you to do. And you would be fine with it because I would explain it in such a way that was better. So my mom's been doing this forever and a day. Love you, Mom. Because you taught me how to be a better adult in dealing in the things that I was dealing with and how to better understand what my needs were as a child and make sure that I thrived as a child. And without even taking, this assessment, my mom was amazing at this, but if she had the assessment, I bet she would have gotten there a lot quicker. There was a lot of arguments before we got to that point, right? Because I was a very headstrong child. So, going through this and in the DISC profile, there's 4 different main categories. There's the D, the I, the S, and the C. Therefore, it's called the DISC. And in the business world, it equates to different types of leadership, different types of employee styles. In communication, it's different types of interaction styles. But with the parents and the children, there's 4 different children styles and 4 different parenting styles that we go into. And it's good to understand what the background is. First of all, if any of you love Wonder Woman, the person who created Wonder Woman is the creator of this assessment.
Oh, good. So can we just call it the Wonder Woman assessment?
I love that more than anything. So he created Wonder Woman as one of the things, but he also created the lie detector test. So this comes out of the different behaviors. So if you understand what a lie detector test does, it measures the differences between what happens when you're under stress and what happens when you're relaxed. And so the assessment came out of what types of behaviors, what categories people fall into, what they're likely to do, and if they're under stress, what they're likely to do under stress as well.
Awesome. So let's jump in. Let's start by talking about the 4 styles that you see that kids fall into. And this is not like just young children. This is like children through tweens and teens and probably even into young adulthood. There's a morph. But let's start with the kids. What are their 4 primary styles?
The 4 primary styles that we fall into are determined, influencing, conscientious, and steadfast. So I kind of have them a little out of order, but it does all DISC.
Yeah,
just so you know.
All right. So let's do like let's do like a 2-sentence description of each, or 3-sentence, so that parents can kind of go, okay. And let me ask you, these are not isolated necessarily. Like we could have a determined with a conscientious to some aspect, right?
Yeah. So the good news is we're a blend of all 4 of these styles, which makes it easy to adapt out in and out of these styles because we have a piece of every single one of them as part of our profile. And what makes us unique is that different levels of what we have of each of these different profiles in it. And it's good to understand a little bit about where these come from a little bit further. So a DISC profile is some innate qualities we're born with, the core qualities that we come up with. But more importantly, our role models up until age 12 and our experiences after age 8. So even if you have a determined child, they could have experiences that shy them away from some of those qualities or enhance those qualities even more so in other areas. That's what makes us unique as humans. That's why you and I could be a similar style. We could be in a similar category with one another, which I think we are, by the way. But we're different because of our unique experiences and the luggage. I call it luggage, not baggage, luggage that we carry with us because it's part of who we are. I could have had a really super great experience with something that you had a not so great experience with, and it skewed us in those areas that fall into our category, towards or away from some of those characteristics that are part of it. So determined children, they're assertive. They might be categorized as being a little bit headstrong. They may be misinterpreted as bossy. But it's more about they want to solve problems and they want to be in control of things that are happening around them. So it's good to understand assertiveness is different than being aggressive. Aggressive is such a different thing. And I do this in the business world as well, because as these determined children grow up, they still have those monikers that haunt them. And so it's very important not to say bossy, but rather say assertive, problem solving, in control. They have a desire and a motivation to be in control of situations. And that's what calms them down. And that's what keeps them doing the things that they love to do the most. And taking away something like that may not be the best option, even though, again, the child can't always be in control of the relationship. So, but there are things we can do. So as we talk about parenting styles, there are things we can do for these children to give them what they need. The influencing style sounds just like it is. They are social, they are talkative, they are headstrong as well. They need to be liked by others and they want to be included. And it's very important to understand out of all of the categories. Now, children in and of themselves, we all think they want to be included in everything. This one is to an extreme. This is very much so to an extreme. If they're not included, there's a problem with it. Rather than if they're not included, they're sad. This is an extreme version of that in some cases. So we need to understand what it means that if they're not included in something, included in the decision making, included in what's happening, they're the ones that are facilitators, more or less. They're also very much so peacemakers in relationships. There's two categories that fall into that peacemaker category. This is one of the two. So the first one we talked about is a very task-oriented, high-level information. This one is a people-oriented, needing high-level information as well. So and they're very similar. The first two are very similar to each other because they're both active profiles. Okay. And when we talk about this, I will tell you about 10 to 15% of our population falls into these two categories as children and as adults.
Okay. Very
important to know that.
Like 10 to 15% of our population in each, or 10 to 15% combined?
Combined.
Wow, that's not a lot.
Great question. Yes. So active profiles, but children are active in general in a lot of different ways, but you have the more relaxed and passive children that you can see, and you have the children that are bouncing off walls. And I use my hands when I talk. I'm an active profile. That's actually to get energy outside of us.
Yeah, it is two of us.
Yeah, like I said, you and I, similar profile.
Very similar.
So it's good to understand that you're going to encounter this. And if you're a passive profile as a parent, there's the likelihood of you having passive children is higher than if you're an active profile as a parent having active children.
Right, just by the numbers.
It's the percentages. So and the categories are based in North America.
Okay.
Different countries have different percentages for things.
Got it. Okay.
Italians use their hands a lot. They have more active profiles there. So their active profiles are a higher percentage. In the United States, we like to sugarcoat things. We're more of a passive country by nature.
Right.
So,
okay.
The third category is let's go with the steadfast because it puts them in order again. They have a need for stability and routine. So if you're an active profile type individual, you're probably a little bit more on the spontaneous side as a parent. These children need their routines. If your child is more on the active side, they're less likely to fall into a routine with things, and they're okay with rolling with the punches. So it's good to understand that. It's also good to understand that you have to give them some sense of their routines when you're working with them. So if you're taking away their routines for some reason, you have to add something back into it or explain to them why the change is necessary. When somebody is steadfast, they want harmony around them. They want happiness for happiness sake. And the steadfast category happens to be the largest category.
Okay.
It happens to be about 69% of the population.
Wow.
Yes. And the other hallmark of this category is they will agree with something and say yes to things, even if they mean no, because they are conflict averse. So these are, these are the children that fall into the category of being passive, and passive children need to step away from things to digest more information. So when we talk about active and passive, it's very good to understand, because as an active individual, I go through things very quickly and make decisions very quickly. And I get to that point and I understand what the next step is, and I want to move to the next step as quickly as possible. But if you are an active parent and you have a passive child, you've got to give them their time to digest the information and to walk away from the situation and to kind of just take in everything and come back to that situation. So it's kind of like one of those things that's but the big thing that's the issue is they will agree with something, even though they don't want to do something, just so they stay away from conflict.
Which we know as adults ultimately results likely in more conflict.
These are the ones, this is the child that never gets upset about anything, and all of a sudden there's an explosion because it's been building for a while, because they are not happy with the results of things. And all of a sudden there's this big explosion that occurs because they've been not telling you that it's not that they're lying. I don't like to use that term. They've just been agreeing because that's easier for them to process and deal with in the situation, because they're not going to make people unhappy around them.
Right.
This is also in the adult world. They're the ones that will do things in detriment of their own happiness consistently as well. And as a child, they do similar things. So children are a little bit more in that realm of I want things that make me happy type things, but they learn very quickly when they're making other people unhappy, they themselves are unhappy, and they choose to not make themselves unhappy in that sense. Making others unhappy. They don't like the feeling themselves, so they don't want to do it to other people. So they're also a people-oriented individuals. The difference between the influencers and the steadfast children, influencers will only do things that make themselves happy. So when they're not going to be happy in a situation, they change what's going to happen. They influence people into a different direction, so everyone is happy in the situation. Steadfast children will not do that. They will continue down a path even if they're unhappy with it, because other people are happy with that situation. And the best thing to say is, if you have 3 children and you have a steadfast and you have an influencer and you have, because we've talked about it already, the determined children, the determined child will say, this is what I want to do, because they tell you what they want to do. The influencer will also tell you what they want to do. And the steadfast will sit back and hear what the other 2 want to do and go along with the other 2, even if it's not what they want, because the other 2 are happy in that situation. So it's good to understand, if you have a steadfast, you go to them first. What would you like to do? When I had it's an S profile. When I had S profiles working in the corporate world, I would look at them first and say, what do you suggest we do in this situation? Before anyone else spoke, because then I'm getting a more true sense of what they want to do. They still are going to fall back on agreeing with what everybody else wants to do, but at least you have their opinion first and foremost, so you can drive that conversation.
Good. All right. And
conscientious is the last one. They hate confrontation as well. They're passive, but they're more cautious. They ask a lot of questions and they need a lot of information. This is the why is that? Why is that? Why is that? That's that part of the child that's coming out, is that C part of the child. When that is happening, it's that conscientious part. When you get the 5,000 questions all at once, it's that part. And the number one thing I can always tell you is, as a child, I was told not to ask a lot of questions. I stopped asking questions eventually. So don't tell them not to ask questions. So,
and that's I know that's so hard for so many parents because they just want to put a lid on the why.
I used to turn it around when I was a nanny for 7 years. And I had a kid who asked me a lot of questions, and I'm an active profile. So I just wanted to move on. And I would turn it around and say, so you've heard the answers I've already given to you already. Why do you think it happens that way? I would turn the question back on them, and then they would start to ponder it. They're still getting that inquisitive nature out, and they're still doing it. They just ask a different question then. And it's not the same question, and it's not the why questions. They come up with a different question because you're teaching them how to ask questions in a good way to get the information they need. So, well, why do you think it happened that way? and then they're just like, well, you told me this and this, but I need to know this much more information. Okay, let's talk about what you need to know now. It gets them a different way.
Well, and from an educational background, which is where I come from, is that actually then facilitates actual processing, not just feeding, the whole, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, but you teach him to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. It teaches them how to think, and it broadens the scope of the conversation that you can have with them.
Mm-hmm. It teaches them it's literally, like, I used to use it in the business world all the time too. People would come to me and say, okay, you've given me this information, but what should I do? And I'm like, what do you think you should do? You have the information. You tell me what else you need to know right now. It's driving the results that you need in a different manner. And it saves face for somebody who's an active profile dealing with passive children, because if you are active, I'm going to tell you the likelihood of you having at least one passive child is very high.
Well, and it also strikes me, and I know we're going to jump into the parent styles here momentarily, that as we listen to this isn't, family dynamics aren't just, parent to child. If you have a co-parent, whether you're married to that co-parent, cohabiting with that co-parent, or co-parenting across the street or across the country, having an understanding of how that other adult engages within these styles also informs how we can better interact with the kiddos. Like, I'm thinking of a conversation my husband and I had yesterday, and he and I are very different personality profiles. And I'm all like, or behavior profiles rather. So let's talk parent profiles, or parent styles.
So there's 4 categories with this as well. They follow the D, the I, the S, and the C, but there's just no way to put those monikers on it in that way. So it's the alliteration just isn't there. So the D style is going to be the boss. So this is going to correspond with that determined child. So if you are a boss with a determined child, this is most likely going to be a marriage made in heaven type situation in a lot of cases, except for when you have 2 very determined people, what happens in those situations?
Lots and lots of headbutting.
Yes. And I know the answer to this. I know how to solve this problem. And it's that stubborn type of profile that kind of gets in trouble sometimes. But again, you're going to understand your child more if you're a boss with a determined child, because they're most like you are. So, and that's good and bad. It's a double-edged sword on that case. It always is. But this is a do it or else. This is going to be a results driven, my way or the highway type thing. The good news is there's only 3% of the population that actually falls into a D category as a single D. Now we have blends that bring this into play, but as a dominant D profile, 3% of the population falls into it. So they're great problem solvers. They're great in crisis, but the do it or else type situation, even though it is good in some situations, it's not good in most situations. And with most of the children profiles, but if you have somebody who's waffling a lot, do it or else is a very good thing to have in that situation, especially if it's urgent. You need to have a quicker decision. It's not something that you have somebody who can take a lot of time deciding on. But explaining that we can't take a lot of time deciding on it is the very first step in those cases. It's not just, I'm taking away your ability to do what you need to do. It's here's why I'm taking away your ability to do that one thing, because there's a fire in the house and I am telling you to get up and run kind of thing. This is an urgent situation that needs to be dealt with in a very high level of, you just need to be told. I'm just telling you exactly what needs to happen in this situation. So, the really great thing is they're great problem solvers. They take in little information, solve the problem, and move on. So when you have kids and you have those things that interrupt you and those things that are just, it's always amazing what children can come up with as that is happening that you've never dealt with before. And it's just like you're going, and where did this come from? This style of parenting actually does very well in those situations. They take in the information and they solve the problem as quickly as possible, and they move on to the next thing. They give clear expectations to their children. Here are the things I expect of you. This is a wonderful thing to give to especially growing children, is here is the list of expectations that you have. They will guide and prepare their children for decision-making and choices in the future. So their main goal is to teach to fish, not take care of them forever. So really great qualities to have, really great things to do. Will not stay silent though if they don't agree with their children's choices. So
I have no idea what that was like.
So if you fall into this category, you're going to be more direct in nature. You've probably been accused of being aggressive in nature in some cases at some point. And when I say probably, it might be a case, it may not. You're assertive, you know what you want to do. You want to quickly move through things and get to the next level as quickly as possible. So the second one is the communicator. This is going to be the I profile. These are instinctive communicators. I's are encouragers. They're cheerleaders. They actually fall into the bargaining of things because, again, this matches with that influencer child. The communicator is always influencing the way that they want things to happen or the way things should happen. So they inspire children to be who they are, though. These are very great inspirational examples of where you need to be. Sorry, hold on one second. Something's happening in my hallway. I apologize.
No problem.
I didn't want somebody, they can deliver our packages to us and I didn't want them to open the door. So they want to be popular though. They want to be the BFF. This is the fun parents. This is focusing on fun more than the details of what's happening around. So they're open-minded about things and they're going to make choices on what makes them look best in situations. So as a parent, it's going to be what will look best in front of all the other parents. What will do this? So it's not a bad decision. It's just a decision based on how they're going to come out looking in the situation as well. So we can see where that can be a great thing or not so great thing. So there's two sides to it. The one thing that they do well though is also deal well with the unexpected things that occur. This is a roll with the punches, and it's also an active profile just like the bosses. So these are people who are more spontaneous, more capable of taking in information quickly and make choices and decisions. They're both active profiles. And again, 15%, 10 to 15% of the population falls into this category as parents.
Okay.
So, and a lot of times when I see couples that are together, and I talk to a lot of people and we talk to about who their significant others are for communication and things like that, and dealing with a lot of people, you will have an active and a passive in a situation more often than you'll have two actives in a situation. You also have two passives in a situation more often than you have two actives in a situation. But it happens, you have two active profiles. You want to be surrounded by people who are most likely like you. So guess what you do? You seek out these individuals and surround yourself with these individuals.
Indeed, yeah.
So that's kind of, but this is that inspirational. This is the style that's near and dear to my heart, of course. So
as a coach, Absolutely.
These are good coaches and mentors. These are the teach the children how to fish type individuals as well. It's always about making sure they understand how to survive in the world and what to do best and what works for them, not just for themselves. This parenting style actually pays attention to who they're dealing with more often than the other parenting styles, which is so funny because when we go back to that DISC profile, I's are very ego driven. They like themselves to be happy in situations, and they do. They spend a lot of time making other people happy as well, which is why they are the ones that pay attention to the needs of others. And it's kind of one of those things. They do it because it makes them happy, but they will only do things that make them happy. But it just so happens that other people being happy makes them happy. Right. So they spend a lot of time doing that. So,
all right.
And we have this as part of us as parents as well. So just so you know, this is a piece of you that you have as part of you, regardless of your dominant profile. So, okay. And I think deep down, I think all parents want the best for their children. So they
absolutely
all want to do that. And I think as children, we all want the best for the people around us as well in some capacity, even though children tend to do it in a different way. And we grow into these types of parents. But nurturing is the next one that we come up with. And this is going to match with that steadfast profile. And again, 69% of the population falls into this category. So it is these are nurturers, but they avoid conflict at all cost. So it's about making sure conflict doesn't occur. More often than not, these are the overprotective and helicopter parents in an extreme version, only in an extreme version though.
Okay.
The tendencies are still there. So if you are a nurturer, you have those tendencies to become more overprotective because you just want to isolate your children from getting hurt in any capacity. Sure. Passive profiles tend to want to do that more often than active profiles because active profiles see that it's getting your knee allows your skin to become stronger in that area. So whereas a nurturer would more likely want to stop the skinning of the knee. Right. It doesn't mean they always do that, but it means that that's what their capabilities are going towards an extreme version. They are do this way or insert guilt here. So whatever I'm going to guilt you with, this is do it here, or this is what's going to happen to you, kind of individual. They like routine. They want to make others feel like they belong. So remember, the I's and the S's are the people oriented of the two categories. So they always want to focus on the people side of things. These are also the parents that know every detail about their children. What they like, what they don't like, what their friends like, what their friends don't like. They're nurturers. They want to nurture their children. They will do everything in their power to keep everybody happy around them, even to the detriment of their own happiness. So I always think of the S profile as the mothering profile because I grew up with a nurturer as a mother. So I always relate this 100% to a mother because, it was everyone around them needs to be happy in detriment of what their happiness means for themselves. So again, avoiding conflict at all costs. And they have difficulty responding to the unknown. So change is not a great thing in the S profile. They're resistant to change in the beginning unless it's thoroughly explained to them why the change is necessary. They don't like unanticipated things. They like things to have routine. They like things to have a plan of action. And they like to know what that plan of action looks like. So it's, again, double-edged sword with most of these qualities that we're talking about in characteristics.
Awesome.
The last profile is structured organizer. Just like it sounds, they're instinctive organizers. Do it this way, or here are the possibility of consequences of not doing it. So they're going to list everything that can go wrong. Kind of like going to the doctor's office when you're going in for a minor outpatient surgery type thing, but they tell you there's a possibility you might die. this is the type of parent that will do those things. So got to give you everything that can occur in this because they know what the answer to that is. They strive for logic and consistency. They're detailed, factual, logical thinkers, rule bound by the book. So there's a plan. We got to follow the plan. Very much so plan followers. Don't like the plan being interrupted unless it's necessary. They can be critical and they will set high expectations for not only themselves, but for their children. So this is, again, great and not so great. Setting higher standards means you're having a better balance for your children to understand that not everybody gets a trophy. But setting too high of an expectation causes undue stress. So there's got to be a balance there sometimes. So again, there are great things about each and every one of these because you need structure. Children always need structure. Children and people need structure. All people need structure. Even those who want to move from thing to thing and flow and do so many things, they need structure as well.
Absolutely.
Everybody does. So those are the 4 parenting styles that we come up with. And I don't know where we are on time. Where are we?
We're actually coming close to needing to wrap up for our public podcast. So what my takeaway is at this point, relative to a lot of the families that I've worked with, is one of the keys to more effective relationships, less stressful relationships, better communication, which, let's be honest, is quite the challenge, especially with the age range that we support primarily at Parent Tween Connection. Is, the tweens are typically like the 9 to 12-year-olds, and then the teens, certainly, like once we cross that threshold birthday into 13, the communication often breaks down. And I think understanding these primary characteristics of the kids, as well as the primary characteristics of how we as the adults show up. And yes, I know that we're talking about this parent versus child, but like, I know you and I don't actually have kids, but we have kids in our worlds.
Yes.
And so recognizing how we show up as another member of that proverbial village versus how the kid shows up, understanding those, and then taking those next steps that we're going to talk about in our exclusive Parent Tween University segment of how do we actually navigate some of these differences. Understanding our differences is key to having better relationships.
Exactly. So for instance, if you have a child that doesn't want to eat, depending on who they are, if they want control over the situation, the best thing to do is to give them a choice. The choices are the things that you have control over, though. So you don't lose control in that situation. You're giving them an option. You're giving them 2 things to choose from, and you're giving them the power to have that control back as well of what they get to choose. So if you have a child that doesn't know what to wear, or they don't want to wear what you're having them wear, give them 2 options of things that are comfortable for them to wear. I mean, you can't wear a scuba suit to church. Well, you can, I guess.
I mean, I guess you could, but
I mean, if they're going to a wedding, for instance, a scuba suit probably isn't the best thing, but give them 2 choices. And I always like to say, give one of those options. As a nanny, I would always make sure one of the options was going to be the better option for them to choose. I'm driving them towards what I want them to do as doing it, but I'm giving them the option to choose between the 2 things. And if they don't want any of those 2 choices, then their third choice is to not to do anything at all in what they want to do at all. So either you get to do something that you want to do, you get to choose between A or B, or you get to do exactly what I'm telling you to do. So going back to that first parenting style of do it or else kind of thing, because now the situation has turned into that. But it should never come to that point if you're giving them 2 good options to choose from. But for somebody who needs more structure, like our conscientious individuals that need a little bit more structure and details around things, give them the options of what's out there and why you chose the option that's there, or why they have to eat the food. This is the drink your milk because it'll make you grow up big and strong. That doesn't work with every child, but it's going to work with a certain type of child.
Right.
And you're explaining to them that if you don't eat your vegetables, you can't do this activity that you like to do all the time because you won't be strong enough to do it. So it's just understanding what works best for your kids
Right.
and what works best for the children around you that surround you. I have many nieces and nephews, and I will tell you one thing: they'll try your patience. Especially the younger ones, they're trying to figure out where their place is in the world, and with you as an adult in their world. And oftentimes, I kind of look at them, and I do this as I know who people are. I figure out who they are based on their behaviors, and you know I have nieces and nephews that fall into that very logical thing. So it's very easy to logically explain to them why they need to do something. Whereas if you have somebody who's more in that influencing area, they want to know they need to understand better why it works better for people around them. So you explain it in a different way. So giving them those things that they need and making sure that they understand how that works is exactly what we should do. We should do it as adults for other adults.
That. Well, and I think it's also particularly important. I was having this conversation with a mom the other day that, when the kids are little, they need the adults around them to do the things and to do the fishing and to cook the fishing and to cook the fish and to feed the fish. But then as they get into this tween to teen age range, our jobs as the adults in their lives are less autocratic and less dictatorial and way more guiding and mentoring and teaching to fish. So I see that almost superseding the individual personalities that just from a developmental perspective, doing more of that explanation and discussion of the why behind things and giving them the agency to make more of these decisions ultimately ends up teaching them more effectively just because of where they're at developmentally. And it really works for certain personalities.
Absolutely. And the other thing, one of my favorite things to do is if they have a passion or a love of something, I always try to enrich that passion. So if they're readers, I want to make sure they're reading. I want to encourage them to be the people they're going to be as adults. And encourage them that it's okay to be that regardless. So you can be headstrong and you can be determined and you can be conscientious and you can be steadfast, but I'm going to encourage you to be that individual where the strength needs to be and understand what your limitations are and where you need to understand that doesn't always work in the world. And one of my favorite phrases is that's just not how the world works, sweetie.
Exactly.
And they'll look at me and I'll say, but I'll give you some options of what you can do that'll make you happier in the situation, kind of thing. And I mean, not verbatim that way, but basically that's what I'm doing for them. So I have nieces who do all different types of things, and I have nephews that do all different types of things. And I try to encourage each and every one of what their strengths are and where they are with things, and making sure that we're getting them to understand. And it's kind of one of those things that's a sneaky way of doing it, because I'm basically teaching them where their strengths are when I'm doing this. And as somebody who is a part of their lives as an adult, who is a role model, who is a mentor, and who is a coach, I'm teaching them how to be an adult when they are in that point and what they liked as children, because I'm the adult that I wanted the adults around me to be.
Right.
And I'm also the adult of the adults that I was around and raised by. So it comes from both sides. It really does. And when we do this, we are teaching them to be better adults and better equipped to deal with that world out there, because they're only going to strengthen in those paths that they're already on. That's it. And it's either going to be a good experience or a bad experience. There's no in between experiences. That's good and bad. That's it. Because a not so great experience is a bad experience, and they want to shy away from that, which we can turn that around into something that becomes good later.
Sure thing.
If we do the right things for them and say, hey, you don't like change. I understand that, but explain to me why the change is so bad.
Right.
Or just like we were talking about the way to ask the questions earlier. It's just like, why? Turn it around on them and say, Well, what do you think the answer is?
Mm-hmm.
Get them talking in a sense so you understand the information they're still looking for.
Right.
Instead of having that bombardment as an active individual, having somebody ask me the same question 15 times drives me insane. It really does. I have a lot of patience with children. I coached children for years. I was a gymnastics coach for years, and I was a nanny for years. So I have been around children most of my life, and I understand that they each individually need certain things based on who they are.
Mm-hmm.
When one of the children would ask me 15 times in a row, my frustration level started to rise. And I understood. One day I just looked over and said, so why do you think it happens that way?
Out of pure frustration, if nothing else.
And their response back to me gave me the information I needed to answer the question for them. Mm-hmm. And that was just an eye-opening experience for me. And I was fortunate enough to be in my 20s when that occurred, because I understood that the same thing happens as adults.
Right.
So
absolutely.
We need to give different information to everybody around us in different manners, but we need to know what they're looking for. So it's so easy with somebody to get frustrated, but it's so simple to resolve that frustration in a different manner. And what I did in that case was change my style mm-hmm. in that moment. Instead of looking at them and saying, stop it now, I looked at them and said, tell me what you think.
Right. And I think that's the key, because we're the ones who have the fully formed brains. We're the ones who can adapt more and more easily.
And we are the ones that should be adapting. So indeed. It really should be us that's adapting to meet our children's needs around us, and, awesome. and encouraging them to become and understanding how they should be adapting to mm-hmm. the people around them as well. Because absolutely. Even though it's a subconscious level that we learn on sometimes, and that's a subconscious thing that we pick up on. When our parents adapt to meet up, we eventually recognize that the adults around us are doing these things. Mm-hmm. We naturally do the same things as well.
Well, because it's what's being modeled for us. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up. Coach yes. Jen Bilger, thank you so much for being with us. For anyone who's listening, if you are interested in reaching out to Coach Jen to get more information, she is able to do DISC assessments for parents and kiddos. So we'll have all of her contact information in the show notes for both the podcast and the YouTube version of this interview. So Coach Jen, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I so appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, that wraps up today's episode of Parent-Tween Connection Talks. Be sure to check the show notes for any links we mentioned. Also, be sure to subscribe to Parent-Tween Connection Talks on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube so you don't miss out on any awesome information. If you'd like your own copy of the Foundations of Connection, you can find it right on our homepage at parenttweenconnection.com. Print it out, hang it on your fridge, and use it as a conversation starter with the folks in your family today. And if you want to feel more supported as a parent and have a closer, healthier, happier relationship with the tween in your life, enroll in Parent-Tween University. For just $19.99 a month or $199 a year, you'll join a community of parents just like you who are dedicated to having the best relationships they can with their kids. You'll receive exclusive bonus trainings from many of our podcast guests and access to monthly group coaching calls based on my signature coaching program, The Foundations of Connection. So go to www.parenttweenconnection.com today to help ensure that you're the one your kids will talk to when they need someone they can trust. Until next time, keep talking and keep connecting.